I am making an Earthbound Immortal deck profile for post Maze of the Master. And I tested this deck a bit. This is still like a prototype build for the current version. The one I played before, I tested before this, used the walkers, like Supe Dusk is always get the names confused. Supe Duskwalker and Escator Dawnwalker. That build felt a bit too clunky, so this is what I'm currently playing with. Starting off with the monsters, I play 3 copies of Earthbound Prisoner line or Groundskeeper. Groundskeeper has the effect that while there's a field spell in play, your Earthbound monsters cannot be destroyed. And then when it is normal or special summoned, once per turn you can special summon a level 5 or lower? Or level 6 or lower? Level 5 or lower Earthbound monster from your deck or graveyard. And you can only use that effect of Earthbound Prisoner Groundskeeper once per turn. And then next, I play 3 copies of Earthbound Prisoner Linewalker. Linewalker has the effect that when it's normal or special summoned, you can add 1 Earthbound Prison or Harmonic Synchro Fusion from your deck or graveyard to your hand. And then it also has the effect that while it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to then target 1 monster your opponent controls that was summoned from the extra deck. Return it to the extra deck, and then your opponent can summon 1 monster from the extra deck that has the same name as the returned monster. Which I'm pretty sure that's only meant to be used for Earthbound Servant Geo Kraken's effect. Next, I play 3 copies of Earthbound Prisoner Stonesweeper. Stonesweeper has the effect that you can discard it to add any level, level 4 lower fiend tuner. At any level, you can discard it so you can add any level 3 or lower fiend tuner from your deck to your hand. And then while there's a field spell, you can special summon it from your hand. And then you can only use, I believe it doesn't do anything else. Okay, when you use its effect when you discard it from your hand, it locks you into synchros and fusion monsters from the extra deck. And you can only use each effect of Stonesweeper once per turn. And then next, I play 1 copy of Earthbound Immortal Kokoraya, Asilapisku, and Weir Kocharaska. All of the Earthbound Immortals, except for Earthbound Immortal Red Nova, share the effect that if there's not a field spell in play, they self-destruct. And then they can attack directly but cannot be attacked. And then the one effect that all the Earthbound Immortals share, including Red Nova, is that there can only be 1 face-up Earthbound Immortal on the field. And after that, they'll have their own unique effects, where Weir Kocharaska has the effect that when it's normal summoned, you can return up to 3 cards on your field back to your deck to make your opponent discard an equal number of cards to what you returned, and then it gains 1,000 attack points for each card your opponent discarded. Asilapisku has the effect that if it leaves the field other than by its own effect, it then destroys all special summon monsters on your opponent's field. Or is it just all monsters? I can't remember. I always get confused. It's either all or all special summoned. Let's see. You can destroy all monsters on your opponent's field and inflict 800 points of damage for each monster destroyed. And then Kokoraya just destroys the rest of the field. It basically just Black Rose Dragons the board away, which is kind of fun. They also play 1 Kokopakapu, 1 Chakuchalua, and 1 Kusulu. Kokopakapu, I feel like, has the worst effect of the Immortals, as its effect is just, if it destroys a monster in battle, then your opponent takes damage equal to that destroyed monster's attack points. I don't understand why it has that effect when it can just attack directly. And then Chakuchalua actually has 2 effects, where while it's in defense mode, your opponent cannot enter their battle phase. And then, once per turn, it can inflict damage to your opponent equal to half its defense. And then if it uses this effect, it cannot attack that turn. And usually Chakuchalua is the best Earthbound Immortal to summon. But that's just because when you special summon an Earthbound Immortal in this deck, it's usually through Geo Griffin. And since Griffin summons in defense, Kusulu. I was about to say Kusulu. Chakuchalua is usually the better of the Immortals to summon just because of that 1200 burn and then no battle phase. And then Kusulu, I feel like is actually a fun one for time, as if you have your battle phase and time is called, you can have if you have another monster along with Kusulu, then you can actually have Kusulu attacking an opponent's monster that's stronger than it to trigger its own effect. Or if it would be destroyed in battle, you can attribute one other monster you control, so that Kusulu isn't destroyed, and then your opponent's life points are halved. And then I also play one copy of Earthbound Immortal Uru. Uru has the effect that once per turn you contribute one other monster you control to take control of an opponent's monster until the end of the turn. And then, lastly, for the monsters, I play 3 copies of Earthbound Immortal Red Nova. Earthbound Immortal Red Nova has the effect that during the main phase, as a quick effect, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard to then send an Earthbound Immortal or Red Dragon Archfiend monster from your field or hand to the graveyard, or I believe it's hand or field. Okay. Send from your hand or face-up monster zone to the graveyard to then activate one of 2 effects, where you can summon an Earthbound monster from your deck or extra deck, or you can special summon a Red Nova Dragon from your extra deck. And you can only use that effect of Earthbound Immortal Red Nova once per turn. And that's it for the monsters. Moving on to the spells. The spells, I play 1 copy of Earthbound Whirlwind. This is just Harpy's Feather Duster while you control an Earthbound Immortal. Then I play 1 copy of Terraforming. This just lets you add the field spell, since most Earthbound Immortals will self-destruct without the field spell. And then lastly, I play 1 copy of Harmonic Synchro Fusion. Harmonic Synchro Fusion has the effect where you send 2 monsters you control, 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner, from the field to the graveyard, and then special summon from your extra deck a Fusion and a Synchro that you can make using just those 2 monsters. And then I believe it. I don't remember what the rest it does. I know it does have an additional effect. Okay, and then after that, it just locks you into Fusion and Synchros from the extra deck, which is fine because this deck only uses Fusion and Synchro monsters. Then moving on to the next spells, I play 2 copies of Earthbound Fusion. Earthbound Fusion has the effect that you can only activate it during your main phase, unless there's a field spell in play. But just lets you fusion summon an Earthbound monster by using 2. So, just lets you summon a Dark Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field's material. And then during the main phase, if there's a card in the field zone, this card's in the graveyard, you can then banish this card from your graveyard to special summon an Earthbound monster from your hand. Then next, I play 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. Triple Tactics Talent can only be activated when your opponent has activated a monster effect during the main phase. But if they do, then you can activate one of 3 effects, where you can draw 2 cards, you can take control of opponent's monsters at the end of the turn, or you can look at your opponent's hand and send 1 card from the hand back to the deck. And you can only activate 1 Triple Tactics Talent per turn. And as long as I remember correctly, the only downside of this card is that even if you're not using the draw 2 effect, this card can still be ashed because it does include the ability to let you draw 2 cards. However, usually ash is what causes to be used, so that doesn't normally come up. And then I play 2 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust. Triple Tactics Thrust can only be activated when your opponent has activated a monster effect during your turn, but it lets you set a normal spell or normal trap from your deck. But if your opponent has a monster, then you can also add it to your hand instead of just setting it. And then if you set it, then it can't activate this turn anyway. You can only activate 1 thrust per turn, you can only activate 1 talent per turn. I don't remember if I said that or not. Moving on, I play 3 copies of Earthbound Prison. I did find out that Earthbound Prison is technically an out to Ryzeal Detonator. As you activate Earthbound Prison, target the detonator to then negate Detonator's effects as long as Prison's in play. And if they use Detonator to destroy Prison, then as long as you have an Earthbound monster in your graveyard, then Earthbound Prison will then activate from the graveyard to negate all face-up cards your opponent currently controls, as well as have their life points. The fun part of this card is that it is not a once per turn destruction effect. And at one point, it actually got eradicated while Earthbound Prison's destruction effect was able to be activated. So it triggered 3 times. So their life points immediately went from, like, I think it was like 7,200 to 36. Then it was 18, and then 900. Which I actually thought was hilarious. And then the other effect of Earthbound Prison is once per turn, it gives you an additional normal summon of an Earthbound monster. And then next, I play 3 copies of Allure Darkness, since this isn't a deck composed entirely of dark monsters. So I figured, why not just play a draw 2, then banish a dark monster, otherwise your entire hand goes to the graveyard. And then next, I also play 3 copies of Toku Sano Shinkyojin. I'm only playing this because I'm playing 7 level 10 monsters that this can just send. As it lets you send monsters from your hand or field to the graveyard that's levels equal 10 to draw 2 cards. But the fun part of this card is that, just like Trade-In, it is now a once per turn thing. And that's it for the spells. Moving on to the traps, I play 2 copies of Earthbound Release. Earthbound Release can only be activated when your opponent special summons a level 6 or higher monster, which this is a card that's obviously laid out against decks like Ryzeal. But when your opponent does special summon a level 6 or higher monster, you contribute 1 level 10 or higher Earthbound monster to then be I think it has to be level 10 or higher. No, contribute a level 10 Earthbound monster to destroy all monsters your opponent controls, and then inflict damage to your opponent equal to half the combined original attack of all those destroyed monsters. I believe... Nope. And the fun part of this card is that it's not once per turn, so if you have 2 of them that you could technically use, then you could technically use 2 in 1 turn. And lastly, I play 3 copies of Eradicator Epidemic Virus. I figure this is probably the deck's best option for going first, as you can set it with Thrust, and most of the monsters in the deck outside of the prisoners actually let you use this with them, so I figured, why not? If you don't want to play this, then you could easily just take all 3 of these out and toss in something like Foolish Burial to send an Earthbound Immortal to grave, just for a little bit of deck thinning. Or even a 3rd copy of Earthbound Fusion. But Eradicator has the effect that you contribute a dark monster that has 2,500 or more attack, and then you call spells or traps, look at your opponent's hand, all their set spells and traps, and every card they draw until their 2nd end phase after its activation, and then you destroy all cards of the declared type, or you destroy all cards of the declared type. Usually this will call spell, but against decks like the Odeon deck, for example, you'll call trap. But most of the time, this will call a spell. And that's it for the main deck. The main deck is currently a 42-card deck, which is why I said take all 3 out and put 1 card back in. Then moving on to the extra deck, I play 3 copies of Earthbound Servant Geogremlin. Geogremlin has the effect that once per turn, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls, and your opponent can either destroy that monster or increase your life points by half of that targeted monster's attack points. And then it also has the effect that during the battle phase, as a quick effect, you can activate the effect to fusion summon an Earthbound monster by banishing materials from your field or graveyard. I don't think it does anything else besides those 2. Okay. Also, its effect of targeting a monster is a quick effect of during the main phase, so you can even do that on your opponent's turn. But I did notice most of the time your opponent will just choose to increase your life points so they are not forced to just lose a monster. Which most of the time you're using that is because you also have Earthbound Servant Geogremlina. Geogremlina has the effect that once per turn, when it's summoned, you can add, or when it's fusion summoned, I actually never really meant. Okay, when this card is special summoned, you can add 1 Earthbound monster from your deck to your hand. And then once per turn, you can target a dark synchro monster you control. It gains the attack to attack your opponent directly this turn. And its last effect is if a card or cards are destroyed by the effect of an Earthbound card or Earthbound monster, then you activate Earthbound Servant Geogremlina's effect, target one of those destroyed monsters, and deal damage to your opponent equal to its original attack. Or is it half again? I don't remember. Target one destroyed monsters. Okay, it's equal to that monster's original attack, and you can only use each effect of Earthbound Servant Geo Grimlina once per turn. And then next, I play 3 copies of Earthbound Servant Geo Griffin. Geo Griffin has the main phase quick effect to be able to summon back an Earthbound monster from your graveyard as a quick, or summon back from your grave in defense position. And then if Geo Griffin leaves the field by an opponent's card, you can then activate its effect, target one card your opponent controls, destroy it, and if you do, inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent for every different Earthbound monster on your field and in your graveyard. Which, let's see, I believe the most that can do is 8, 11, 5, 16. Do quick math. The most this card can do by itself, I believe, is 4,800, but that's having one of each Earthbound card in the graveyard or on field. Which that doesn't normally happen. Usually what this does, like 15 or 2,400 points of damage. Usually it's anything like that. But you can only use each effective Earthbound Servant Geo Griffin once per turn. And then next, I play 3 copies of Earthbound Servant Geo Kraken. Geo Kraken has the effect that when its card is special summoned, you can add a field spell from your deck to your hand. And then it also has the effect that when your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, you can destroy all special summon monsters all monsters your opponent controls that were special summoned that turn, and then inflict 800 points of damage for each monster that was destroyed. I'm fairly certain this card is the only reason why Linewalker has its grave effect of being able to take a monster from the extra deck, return it to the extra deck, and your opponent summons a monster with the same name. I honestly think it would have been a lot better if it had its anime effect where that monster is treated as being just summoned. That would have been so much simpler. And better, because then it's not something like, oh, I put your once per turn negate back. How about you get it back and then you can negate my Kraken? And then next, I play 2 copies of Earthbound Servant Geograsha. Geograsha has the effect that it has to be fusion summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. And that when it battles an opponent's monster, you can activate its effect to change that monster's attack and defense to 0. If it destroys a monster in battle, then it lets you destroy all cards your opponent controls. And then if Geograsha is destroyed, you can special summon an Earthbound monster from your deck or extra deck, except for another Grasha, which I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually say that, since it doesn't ignore summoning conditions and Grasha can only be fusion summoned. I believe there is a level limit to it as well. Let's see. Nope, just special summon an Earthbound monster from your deck or extra deck. And then lastly, for the extra deck, I do play 1 copy of Red Nova Dragon. Red Nova Dragon is just summoned off of Earthbound Immortal Red Nova. But it has the effect that it gains 500 attack for each tuner in your graveyard, so at most it's gaining 3,000, since there's only 6 tuners in the deck. But it also has the effect that when an attacker is declared, then you can banish this card from your you can banish this card till your next standby phase, I believe it was. Okay, no, it's during the end phase it comes back if it was removed by its own effect. But it then negates the attack, and then the last part of its effect is that it can't be destroyed by card effects. Or your opponent's card effects, I believe. Let's see. Yep. And then that is it for my Earthbound Immortal deck profile. If you have any ideas what I can do to improve the deck, and ideas for decks like to see face each other, or your decks like to see me made in the future, comment down below. I always read the comments. Thank you for watching.